Arrogance, pride, hubris, whatever you want to call it, cheaters have it in spades. I think it's a side effect of continually getting one over on the people who are closest to you. I suppose it makes them feel like they're particularly clever or like a secret agent out of some movie. In any case, they're special, or at least they think so. Better than you or me and any other decent person who wakes up every morning thinking they're safe amongst friends, family, and the people who love them. Of course, that's all nonsense. It's not terribly hard to lie to people who trust you, at least until they catch you at it. "Honey, great news," effused my wife, Tracy, as she set her keys and purse down on the small table near our front door. I smiled at her. It was a tepid thing. She hadn't noticed for weeks. "What's that, dear?" I asked. "We've been invited out on a company cruise next weekend," she said. Now this was a lie, and I knew so for a couple of reasons. First off, her eyes were twitching, and her smile was a bit too tight. After 10 years of marriage, I knew when she was being duplicitous, but these were two of her major tells. Secondly, I had read every single one of the text messages between her and Austin Butcher, the man she had been seeing for the last 5 months. "Wow, that's great," I said, the false sincerity practically oozing from my vocal cords. How could she not tell? "What's the occasion? Where are we going?" Tracy headed towards the kitchen and continued to talk to me over her back. "Oh, it's just for meeting our sales targets for the year, and I think we'll be heading out to a private resort for the weekend. It should be a lot of fun. Don't forget to pack a swimsuit." As I listened to the sounds of Tracy screwing around with our coffee maker, I pondered if there was any significance to the 2 more lies she just told me. You see, I knew for a fact that our destination was Butcher's private island, just a few miles off the Keys, and that the occasion was so that he could humiliate me. Text messages, remember? Just as Tracy appeared with her customary after-work Keurig cappuccino, I wondered, not for the first time, if I should just serve the divorce papers and take off for parts unknown. It definitely would be the sensible thing to do. At least far more sensible than getting on the private yacht of a millionaire that wants to embarrass you. However, I did have a couple of advantages over Butcher and my wife. For starters, I knew everything about their plans, but perhaps more importantly, the 2 of them were dumber than doctor posts. Tracy was staring at me with a smug grin, the kind of smile that made me think that her internal monologue was something along the lines of planning my humiliation. I just returned her grin, tooth for tooth, and politely asked what was for dinner. I think it slightly unnerved her. Austin Butcher was nobody special. Not really, anyway. His daddy had created a reasonably large real estate empire back in the 80s, and then had a stroke at the Piggly Wiggly, leaving everything to his idiot son. Austin then spent the next 10 years dismantling it, largely through his own incompetence. Still, he had a giant pile of money, which is what ultimately led him to my wife. My wife, Tracy, worked as a broker for a gallery that dealt in fine art and antiques, the kind of stuff that people with too much money bought, mostly because it was the only kind of long-term investment you could use to politely show someone how rich you were, since lighting cigars with $100 bills fell out of favor in the 1920s. Butcher had an office he needed to furnish, and Tracy had a commission she wanted to collect. The rest, as they say, is history. Honestly, I think it began innocently enough. I still remember Tracy walking through that door with a beaming smile, waving around a commission check like she won the lottery. It had been a hard year for us, the COVID lockdowns having turned our local economy into a tailspin, so Tracy's unexpected windfall was more than welcome. She practically leapt into my lap and kissed me with a fervor that I hadn't felt in what seemed like years. That's how depressed we all felt at the time. "Oh, honey," she exclaimed, "we have this new rich guy client and he's spending money like it's water." If I had been paying more attention, I think I would have seen the dollar signs in her eyes, hindsight being 20/20 and all that. It was kind of cute in a way. She bought me presents, at least at first. She talked about Austin all the time. That was less cute. Eventually, she stopped talking about him altogether, and I never saw her wave another check as she walked through the door, but I knew the money was still coming in. Until it wasn't. I probably would have remained blissfully ignorant of my impending date with Austin Butcher if my wife had been more intelligent. I have a theory about Austin that I won't bore you with, but to summarize in a nutshell, I think he has some serious psychological issues that express themselves in unusual ways. Sorry, I got sidetracked. Tracy is not very bright. She opened a secret bank account and used our home address. I found the statement. There was a lot, and I mean a lot of money in it. More than the both of us typically made in a year. I was a bit stunned, so I asked her in a roundabout way over dinner that night. "Hey, babe," I said while pushing my peas around on my plate. "What happened to those big commission checks? I noticed you haven't gotten one in a while." Tracy, to her credit, only dribbled her red wine out of the corner of her mouth instead of doing a full-on spit take. She floundered for a moment. The little hamster that ran the wheel in her brain was obviously chugging overtime. "I think he moved." I have to admit, I almost laughed at her. She was acting like a preteen who got called out for cheating on her boyfriend. "Oh, don't worry about him. He moved. We don't ride the bus together anymore." "You mean that big real estate guy, right? What was his name again?" I was pretending not to know who he was to allay any concerns she had that I might be onto her. It was probably a waste of effort, because as I mentioned before, Tracy is dumber than a bag of hammers. Austin something, I think," she said. Now, I'm sounding flippant, recounting all this after the fact, but at the time, Tracy's juvenile attempt at deflection hit me like a gut punch. It was at that moment that I was pretty sure my marriage was over. Still, I held out a little bit of hope. Maybe she was just seeing him for the money. I know, it sounds pathetic to me now as well. But hey, your brain plays a lot of bizarre tricks when it's trying to rationalize your entire life and a 10-year marriage going down the drain. So sue me. It wasn't until later that night when I woke up and unlocked Tracy's phone. She never bothered to change her code. She's not too clever, all right. And read her text messages that I fully understood how bad the situation was. I didn't cry, I'll give myself that, but it took me about 2 weeks until my stomach didn't feel like it wanted to rebel at odd times during the day. Anxiety will do that to you if you don't deal with it, and the best way for me to deal with it was to start working on a plan. Knowing where you're going, at least sometimes, is just as good if not better than knowing where you've been. Their plan, like them, was very simple. They were going to drug me at dinner, then with the help of one of the yacht crew who was actually a bodyguard, they'd carry me to Butcher's suite, tie me to a chair, and then wake me up and start their games. They were going to take compromising pictures to blackmail me. Now, I need to point out that as good as this plan might sound to a moron, unless you want to go to prison for murder, you really shouldn't try to drug people with sleeping pills and booze. I'm serious. You can kill someone that way. And you definitely shouldn't discuss such a plan in text messages, especially ones your husband has copied to a cloned phone being held by his lawyer. I mean, if your husband was less scrupulous, he might decide to reverse your dumb plan, be a bit less careful about how many pills he feeds you, and then just claim that you messed up your plan, because, as self-evident, you are not very smart and wrote it all out. Now, I might actually have a bottle of extremely potent benzodiazepine-based sleeping pills in my luggage that my wife ordered on her credit card from an online pharmacy. And it might even be in my overnight bag right now, but it was just one of many plans I had for the night. There was a whole bunch of items, a virtual pharmacy, see what I did there, just waiting to be put to bad use. Everything from liquid magnesium citrate, guaranteed to work in under 30 minutes, to more street-level substances that I obtained from my college-aged cousin. The point being, I had a deck of reverse cards, I just had to figure out how to use them. We were out cruising on the yacht. Despite myself, I actually found the sea spray coming over the bow invigorating. The crew was exactly as I expected it, a captain, a first mate, a cook, and a porter who was actually a thug. The rest of the guests were just a couple of people from Tracy's office, and her boss, Thurgood and his wife Eliza. Eliza at least had the good sense to look slightly uncomfortable about what was going to go on. She clung to Thurgood's arm and every now and then would look at me and frown. Butcher, the pompous fellow, was flirting shamelessly with my wife. I didn't care to stop them, after all. I didn't really give a hoot. Instead, I kept hitting on one of Tracy's co-workers, a slender redhead named Claire, and I made sure to do it in front of her husband. Now, before anyone gives me grief for it, her husband wasn't some unwilling participant like they were trying to make out of me. He was in on the entire setup, just like Claire was, just like everyone on this little floating heap was. I complimented Claire on her bikini. I admired her appearance. I kept refilling her drink. I asked her personal questions. I completely ignored Tracy. It was clear to me that no one knew what to make of my behavior, and no one was amused by it. Tracy was absolutely livid, and I could see Austin calming her down out of the corner of my eye. Good. We were all supposed to dine on the yacht this evening, and then, after what they had planned, we were going to lift anchor and put in on his estate for the morning. I'm certain the weekend would continue from there, with me getting treated poorly, quite literally. I had been trying to decide if I wanted to tamper with Tracy or Butcher's drink tonight. Butcher was appealing for the poetic irony of it all. The dumbass wife accidentally harms her lover instead of her husband, when I saw something off in the distance. "Hey, isn't that a whale?" I said, and pointed off the port side of the yacht. Everyone came to the side of the deck. Eliza must have had some pretty good eyesight as she said, "Something seems wrong with it." "Hey, Williams, port side," Butcher called back to one of his lackeys. The boat shifted and crawled forward over the waves, and as we pulled closer, we could all see that it was indeed a whale. A very, very dead whale. There were the appropriate signs of sadness from the female members of the trip and a command from Butcher to move us away. But as the ship turned to leave, I caught sight of something interesting, but I'll get back to that later. It was getting close to showtime, so I excused myself, claiming I needed to use the head. I went to the galley and introduced myself to the cook. We had a nice talk about both the dinner being served tonight as well as her previous employment. She was very busy, her back turned to me most of the time, so I finally asked her where the cleaning supplies were. After all, I made a mess and wanted to clean it up. She showed me to a small closet on the aft side of the ship, and I thanked her. I chuckled to myself. There were 2 big jugs of what I was looking for. I made a few preparations and then returned, making sure to compliment Claire again. I swear I think this time she smiled. Maybe I should have been giving this flirtatious thing a try from the start. It seemed to work for fellows like Butcher. We were all sitting at the large table in the stateroom when Butcher stood from his chair. "I'd like to propose a toast," his voice cracked, either in excitement or nervousness, maybe both. This guy was a predator, and I didn't feel comfortable. I dutifully raised my glass along with everyone else. "To good friends and new beginnings?" We clinked. They drank. Mama raised no fool, so I set my glass down untouched. A nervous look passed between my disloyal wife and her wealthy playboy. "Honey, you're supposed to drink," she whispered to me. "I don't like champagne," I said. Again, I could see that hamster wheel starting to spin. The vacant eyes were a great giveaway. But, it's rude," she insisted. "Don't care. I gave up alcohol. It's bad for your health, you know." Another look was exchanged, this time between the porter and Butcher. "We'll get you something non-alcoholic to drink, sorry, sir." "Make it a Coke." "Of course, sir." I nodded graciously and then cut into my steak. It looked like a decent cut, well marbled, cooked medium rare, and the only thing on the plate that I hadn't doctored. The conversation was sparse and banal. My wife was uncharacteristically silent. I wondered if she was having a last-minute bout of conscience. Probably not. "Here, sir," the porter thug said, as he placed what looked like a glass of Coke on the table. I smiled and reached for it with a bit more enthusiasm than I had intended, and instead of knocking it over, it went flying across the table. "Oops! Damn it! Can't you do anything right?" exclaimed Tracy. "Sorry," I whined like a petulant teenager and huffed dramatically. "It's okay. We'll just clean this up and get you another one," said Butcher. I could see more than a few beads of perspiration on his pasty brow. Everyone else looked extremely uncomfortable. It was going to get a lot worse for them pretty soon. You see, liquid magnesium citrate is one of the fastest-acting and most powerful laxatives you can purchase. It's an osmotic laxative, which means it works by pulling water into the small intestine. Earlier, when I left for the head, I had made a small side trip to the galley and liberally dosed everything. Well, everything but the steaks. I liked steak. Poor, put upon Claire was the first person to succumb. We all heard the telltale gurgle emanating from her gut, and she politely excused herself with a blush on her face. I momentarily mused that blushing redheads are pretty cute. It went downhill from there, or more like knocking over a row of dominoes. Next was Eliza, then Thurgood. She must have had a weak constitution, he was a fast eater. Then Tracy, Claire's husband, and finally Butcher himself. The dumbass had enough sense to feebly say, "Something must be off," when he returned to the table. He was gone 4 minutes later for another trip. "Here, drink something," I said, holding out glasses of water that I had poured from the large carafe on the table. "You don't want to get dehydrated, you can die," I said with false seriousness. Tracy accepted the first glass from me, then others started to partake. The porter came back from the kitchen to warn everyone that there seemed to be some food poisoning served alongside with dinner tonight, only to be greeted with the foul smell of Thurgood having an accident while clutching his gut. Now, those of you who are clever, or particularly fiendish, probably realize that me offering water to everyone wasn't an act of altruism. I mean, of course it wasn't, right? No, every glass was liberally dosed with MDMA, better known to most of you as ecstasy. Now, if you thought a yacht filled with troublemakers literally having digestive issues was funny, just imagine that, but also experiencing altered states. I really wanted to stay and enjoy the show, but frankly, after a few minutes, the stench was overpowering. Tracy, honey, are you okay?" I asked my wife. She was prone, clutching her guts and sweating profusely. "I don't know what's wrong with me." I helped her up to her feet and led her from the room, claiming some fresh air might help her. It was cool outside, cooler than you might think for winter in Florida, even with the ocean breeze at night. "Tracy, can I ask you something?" She turned her head up from the deck and looked at me. For a moment, the moonlight caught her face, and I almost regretted what I was going to do. "Why did you do it, Tracy? Was it just for the money?" Her face, already pale, seemed to instantly lose all color. Her mouth hung open like a goldfish gasping for breath. "What?" she gasped. "Austin. Tracy, why were you seeing Austin?" My voice sounded sadder than I thought I actually was. That was interesting. "I never—" She started to lie. I cut her off. "Tracy, I know. I know everything. I know what you did. I know what you were planning to do tonight. I just don't understand why. Do you really hate me that much?" I sighed and leaned back against the railing. Tracy was obviously struggling with her digestive issues. "I don't hate you. I swear. I don't know." She grunted. She was losing her battle. "You must hate me. There's no other explanation that I can think of trying to hurt me that much, trying to drug me. Tracy, you were going to let that jerk hurt your husband." I was getting angry now. My hands were clenched in rage. "What the absolute heck, Tracy? What did I ever do to you to deserve that?" She was openly weeping now. The racking sobs finally caused her to lose control of her digestive system. The stench was nauseating, just like her behavior. For me, this was my moment of truth. Did I carry out my improvised plan, or did I just call the Coast Guard? It wasn't too late for me to end it without harm, to end it with a clear conscience. Unfortunately for Tracy, she was very unwise. "Just shut up! Shut up! You did this! You did this, didn't you?" she screeched at me. It seems like that hamster finally arrived at the obvious point. You son of a gun! Why couldn't you just be a good little pushover? You were treated horribly by me for weeks, you wimpy little loser." The moonlight caught Tracy again, and this time, instead of the sweet and beautiful girl I married, I finally saw her for what she was. A piece of work. And you know what they do with unwanted things at sea? They toss them overboard. "Put me down!" she screamed as I heaved ho and tossed her over the port side of the yacht. It wasn't that far down, but she hit with an impressive splash. There was a blessed moment of silence, and then she broke the surface of the water, and the yelling began again. "You jerk! Get me out of here, you loser!" she screamed. I sighed. What an unpleasant person. You see, as I mentioned briefly before, it was winter in Florida. A lot of people probably don't know this, but I was a science teacher, and as observed earlier in the day, when it's winter in Florida, sometimes schools of great white sharks retire to our waters. The interesting thing I saw before dinner was the telltale dorsal fins circling the half-eaten whale corpse. This alone wouldn't mean much, but I'm a science teacher, and hell, I love Shark Week on television. I watch it every time it's on. I knew that there were two things that sharks really love, more than blood even, sound and urea. Well, Tracy was making a lot of sound, especially with her thrashing around in the water. The urea was supplied by the 2 big jugs of ammonia I had tipped out an open window on my way back to complimenting Claire. Tracy was just launching into another round of insults when she let loose with an unearthly wail. "My leg!" she bellowed. Yup. Just like catnip for sharks. Or sharknip, I guess. I hadn't thought it would really work, and truthfully, I would have been just as happy to see her drown at this point, but the science teacher in me was more than a bit tickled. After all, it's always nice to see an experiment come to fruition. I leaned over the rail and yelled right back at her. "We're divorced, you jerk!" She didn't have a rejoinder for that. I think the shock was setting in. I didn't stick around to see what happened. I wasn't that sick, and besides, I had tasks left to do. Returning to the stateroom, I saw most of the crew and guests passed out on the floor. The big guy, Williams, looked like he had overdosed by downing the rest of the carafe of ice water I had left on the table. Butcher appeared to have succumbed to the sleeping pills I had put into his drink. His fingertips were blue, and his breathing was shallow. I found his room, tampered with his luggage, switched a couple of bottles in Tracy's, and then, with a theatrical sigh, I did the last thing I wanted to do tonight. I locked my cabin door and ingested the same substances that I had given the others. It was going to be a long night. The aftermath went much better than I had anticipated. Williams, the thug, had expired as I suspected. His awful boss lived, but that ended up working out well for me when the cops looked through my missing wife's phone and found out about the plan to drug me that night. The fact that she had some highly powerful sleeping pills and MDMA in her luggage, as well as more in her car and office, were the veritable smoking gun. Butcher, of course, was the real culprit. He had messages between him and Williams discussing the plan and even procuring MDMA and Rohypnol for his evening entertainment with me. The case went public, and it was a huge scandal, so big that even Butcher's millions couldn't buy him out of it. He ended up going to jail for a bunch of drug, assault, and conspiracy charges. I sued him extensively in civil court, no pun intended. No one could find Tracy at first. There was some speculation in the media that she had fled the country. I was interrogated by the police. They bullied, they bluffed, but eventually they had to relent as they had nothing. I hadn't even filed for divorce. I hadn't used a PI. I didn't need to. The 2 morons gave me all the evidence I ever needed. And I had never told my lawyer why he was holding a phone for me. I'm sure he suspected something, but hey, suspicion wasn't enough for him to go to the police, especially once I discussed with him my plans about suing Butcher's estate. Like my unfaithful wife, his eyes lit up with dollar signs at the prospect of commandeering some of the wealthy man's many millions. Eventually, a week later, a dismembered torso washed up on a northern beach. It was the obvious victim of a shark attack. They identified it as Tracy from the serial number on her remaining implant. The cop visit started again, but by this time I think everyone was over it. The police explanation was that she had fallen overboard and been eaten by sharks. It was more or less true after all. It was 2 years later when I was vacationing at an all-inclusive resort at Playa del Carmen when I met my future wife, Rebecca. Like me, she was a teacher, and also like me, she had been cheated on by her ex. As with all redheads, I thought she was very cute when she blushed. I remember her coming to my suite on that second night and gasping at how well appointed it was. "Rick, I thought you were a high school teacher. How did you afford all this?" she asked me. I checked her eyes for dollar signs and didn't see any. She took the scotch I had made for her and reclined on the couch. "Well, my dear," I said with an impish grin, "you see my lawyer. He was a real shark." And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.